Imagine, if you will, that you're sitting in a small cafe somewhere in northern Sweden. The air smells faintly of wood smoke, there are pine forests outside the window, and a waitress is approaching your table carrying what looks very much like a wedge of Camembert. She places it down, you take a bite, and it is smooth and creamy and unexpectedly delicate. Then she tells you the sentence you never expected to hear. That was made from moose milk. Moose milk cheese. It sounds almost like a prank, the sort of thing you might make up after a few beers with friends. And yet, it is real and rarer than truffles, pricier than caviar, and produced in such tiny amounts that the entire global annual supply would fit in a modest garden shed. The only place on Earth you can find it is a little farm in Björnholm, Sweden, with the charming name of Elgenshus, the elk house. And yes, just to confuse matters further, what Swedes call elg is what we call moose. So we are indeed talking about the towering antlered forest-dwelling creatures you might associate with Canadian road signs, not Santa's reindeer or a friendly dairy cow. Welcome, cheese and dairy enthusiasts. Whether you're all about Gouda, goat cheese, or a classic cheddar, we're here to share the love of all things dairy with you. So, sit back, relax, and get ready for a fun, cheesy experience. So how, you may reasonably ask, do you go from a half-ton wild animal not especially known for its sociability to a block of artisan cheese served on the plates of Sweden's most exclusive restaurants? That is precisely the journey we are about to take. And let me assure you, it is every bit as strange and fascinating as you'd hope. The first thing to know is that nobody else in the world, apart from one family in Sweden, has managed to pull this off. Krista and Ola Johansson, a couple with a seemingly unlimited supply of patience, began this endeavor in the 1990s. They were inspired, oddly enough, by experiments in Russia, where moose milk was fed to recovering hospital patients who were said to benefit from its high protein and rich mineral content. The Russians, however, never quite managed to make cheese from it. The Johanssons decided they would. And so, in 1996, they adopted a handful of Åsund moose calves, raised them as if they were their own children, and set about doing what no one had done before: milking moose. Now, if you are imagining a neat little milking parlor with stainless steel machines humming gently, banish the thought immediately. Moose do not do machines. They barely do humans. To get milk from a moose, you must have an almost parental bond with it. The Johanssons bottle-fed their calves, slept in the barns with them, and spent months earning their trust. By the time the moose were grown, they accepted Krista and Ola not merely as caretakers, but as family. Only then could the couple even attempt milking. And here's where it gets truly extraordinary. Unlike cows, which will stand calmly and yield 40 liters of milk a day if you pat their flank nicely, a moose will give you, if you are lucky, about 1 gallon in the course of an entire day. And it will take you up to 2 hours of quiet hand milking, in absolute calm with no distractions. Raise your voice, drop a bucket, or make the mistake of bringing a stranger into the barn, and the moose will simply withhold its milk. They are that temperamental. This means that every single drop of moose milk is hard-won, the result of patience, familiarity, and the sort of quiet diplomacy one normally reserves for difficult in-laws. But what comes next, how this rare milk once collected is turned into cheese, is an even greater marvel. So, having coaxed a reluctant moose into parting with a few liters of its precious milk, what do you actually do with it? The answer, rather surprisingly, is freeze it. The Johanssons discovered early on that milking yields were so pitifully small, 3 cows each producing a few liters a day for only 5 months of the year, that making cheese daily was simply impossible. Instead, they collected milk all through summer, pouring each day's meager haul into containers and tucking them away in the deep freeze, like misers hoarding gold coins. Only after months of patient accumulation would they have enough to thaw out and make a proper batch of cheese. In fact, they do this just 3 times a year. When thawed, the milk looks rather ordinary, creamy white, not much different from cow's milk. But that, dear listener, is where the resemblance ends. Moose milk is astonishingly rich. Where a cow's milk might contain 3 or 4% fat, moose milk has up to 12. Protein, double or triple the bovine equivalent. The result is milk that is so thick and nutrient-laden it borders on cream, the sort of substance you imagine would keep a Viking going through an Arctic winter. It is also unusually low in lactose, meaning many people who can't tolerate cow's milk can sip moose milk without complaint. And if all that weren't enough, it is chock full of minerals like zinc, selenium, and iron. In short, it's less a drink and more a superfood. And yet, therein lies a problem. That extraordinary density of protein and fat makes moose milk very reluctant to behave in the way cheesemakers expect. Try to introduce blue mold, for instance, the very fungus that gives Stilton its veining and Roquefort its tang, and it runs riot. Instead of gently spreading through the curd, it erupts like an over-enthusiastic house guest and overwhelms the entire wheel. One Russian scientist famously gave up after concluding the protein levels were too high for proper cheesemaking. But the Johanssons, being both stubborn and inventive, refused to quit. They enlisted local cheesemakers, consulted dairy scientists, even brought in advice from French experts. After much fiddling with cultures, rennets, temperatures, and techniques, they managed not one, but 4 varieties of moose cheese. There is a Camembert-like soft cheese with a white bloom on the rind, a creamy blue that, when it cooperates, is said to be sublime, a feta style that has become their best seller, and a curious hard blue, dried and aged until it resembles Parmesan. Of these, the feta is perhaps the most practical. Packed into jars and preserved in oil, it can sit happily for 6 months to a year, deepening in flavor without spoiling. The blue, by contrast, is so delicate it can't survive transport. It must be eaten at the farm, preferably within days of creation. Think about that. A cheese so rare that you not only have to fly to Sweden to try it, but then drive to a remote forest farm, hope the moose cooperates that season, and eat it on the spot before it spoils. If exclusivity is your thing, it doesn't get much better. And yet, for all this effort, the farm produces only about 300 kilograms of cheese in an entire year, less than a single average cow might yield in a week. Which begs the obvious question, why bother? The answer, as with many curious human enterprises, lies not just in the product, but in the story. Why bother indeed? After all, it would be far easier and certainly more profitable to milk cows, goats, or even sheep. But moose are different. Moose are mysterious, and in Sweden, they are iconic. To Swedes, the moose is not merely another animal of the forest, it is the king of the forest. A creature that features on road signs, folklore, tourist mugs, and even occasionally in traffic accident statistics. To say you make cheese from the king of the forest is to say you have harnessed a piece of national identity, bottled it, and set it on the table with crackers. For the Johanssons, it was also about curiosity and a sense of adventure. No one else had done it, and there is something deeply appealing about being the world's first at anything, especially in a field as ancient and well-trodden as cheesemaking. Cheese has been made from cow, goat, and sheep for thousands of years. Donkey, camel, yak, and even reindeer cheeses exist in small niches. But moose, not until Björnholm 1997. There is, if you like, a kind of pioneering spirit in it, and perhaps a little madness too. The farm itself reflects this blend of practicality and whimsy. Set amid forest and pastureland, Elgenshus isn't just a dairy, it is a tourist attraction, a restaurant, a museum of moose. Every year, some 25,000 people trek out to see the animals, feed them branches of willow, and, if fortune smiles, sample a morsel of moose cheese. The restaurant serves moose steak and stew, but its most talked about offering is a dessert parfait layered with whipped cream, berries, and a dollop of moose cheese. By all accounts, it is heavenly, tangy, creamy, a little wild, and utterly unlike anything else. Now, one might assume that given its rarity and laborious production, moose cheese would taste powerfully unusual, perhaps even off-putting. But the surprise, repeated by nearly everyone who has tried it, is how gentle and approachable it is. The Camembert style is soft and buttery, the feta pleasantly tart, the blue rich without being harsh. It is cheese that whispers rather than shouts. There are earthy undertones, perhaps a faint sense of the forest, but no gamminess, no odd aftertaste. If you didn't know better, you might not guess you were eating anything other than a particularly fine artisan cheese. And yet, the price reminds you otherwise. Depending on the variety and the season, moose cheese sells for between $500 and $1,000 per kilogram. That is more expensive than almost any other cheese on Earth, surpassed only by an obscure Serbian donkey milk cheese called pula. For most of us, that means moose cheese isn't so much a snack as an anecdote. You don't buy it because you're hungry, you buy it because you want to tell your friends that you once ate the rarest cheese in the world. So, on one level, moose cheese is a luxury product, but on another, it is something stranger, almost folkloric, the result of a family's improbable determination to turn the unmilkiest animal imaginable into a source of culinary delight. But how exactly do you persuade a 1,000-pound wild creature, one that could flatten you with a single kick, to stand calmly while you tug at its teats for 2 hours? The short answer is, you don't persuade a moose. You raise it as family. The Johanssons learned very quickly that milking a wild-caught adult was impossible. Moose are not naturally cooperative creatures. They are nervous, solitary, and blessed with both speed and size. So the only way was to start with calves, orphaned ones, abandoned in the forest or sourced from zoos, and raise them by hand. From the first days, the calves were bottle-fed, stroked, spoken to, and kept company night and day. Krista and Ulla even slept in the barns beside them, so the animals would accept them as a constant reassuring presence. Over time, the moose came to view their human caretakers as part of the herd, or more precisely, as substitute calves. This was crucial because a moose cow will not let down her milk unless she believes she is nursing her young. The Johanssons, in a sense, had to be adopted by the moose before they could adopt the moose themselves. By the time the animals matured, a curious reversal had taken place. Here were the largest land mammals of Europe, towering at 7 feet at the shoulder, who would happily nuzzle Krista's hand, accept an apple from a visitor, or stand patiently while Ulla crouched beside them with a bucket. Only the Johanssons could perform the milking. The moose would not tolerate strangers, but that in itself is telling. The animals trusted them implicitly, and in that trust lay the secret of the cheese. Even so, the act of milking is an exercise in patience. Imagine crouching for an hour and a half beside a restless 1,000-pound creature, in silence, gently drawing out milk by hand while the animal shifts its hooves. Every so often, the moose might decide it has had enough and wander off. Or worse, a sudden noise, a door creak, a dropped tool might spook her, and that would be the end of the session. A moose can simply decide not to release any more milk. Unlike cows, which will yield mechanically, a moose must be in the mood. All this explains why production is so limited. Each cow gives only about 3 to 5 liters of milk a day at peak, and only for a few months. Each milking session can consume hours of careful effort. Multiply that by 3 moose, and you understand why the Johanssons freeze the milk until they have enough for cheese making. It is, in every sense, slow food. But the result of those few hundred kilos of cheese each year is treated almost reverently. Wheels of white mold cheese are left to ripen with their bloomy rinds. The feta cubes are submerged in jars of oil, slowly mellowing over months. The rare creamy blue, unpredictable but exquisite, is eaten on site. Each variety is a triumph, not just of dairy science, but of perseverance. And that perseverance has given birth to something more than cheese. It has created a story that brings tens of thousands of visitors to a remote corner of Sweden each year, eager to see the animals, hear the tale, and perhaps taste history in a single bite. Economically, moose cheese makes little sense. 300 kilograms a year would barely stock the dairy section of a single supermarket. Yet culturally, it makes all the sense in the world. It is a luxury product, yes, but also a form of living folklore. A way of turning Sweden's most iconic animal into a story you can taste. That is why the King of Sweden himself reportedly ordered some. That is why chefs put it on menus not so much as an ingredient, but as a talking point. Moose cheese isn't really about cheese at all. It's about curiosity rewarded, patience turned into flavor, and the human desire to nudge the boundaries of the possible. It is about making the world just a little bit stranger and more delightful than it was before. So, the next time you sit down to an ordinary wedge of cheddar or Gouda, pause for a moment and consider that somewhere in a quiet Swedish barn, a woman named Ulla is hand-milking a moose for 2 long hours, gathering just enough for a future wheel of cheese that will cost more than your car payment. And then ask yourself, what else in the world seems impossible until someone somewhere quietly proves it isn't? Because that, dear listener, is the curious gift of moose milk cheese. If you're enjoying this creamy content, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. Believe it or not, 99% of our viewers haven't hit that subscribe button yet. It's totally free and just takes a second. We've got tons of cool stuff coming your way, and in the meantime, leave a comment down below, share your thoughts with us. Your support helps us to keep exploring and uncovering the hidden side of what we eat. So don't be shy, hit that subscribe button and age like fine cheese.